So this is where I kind of pick up the story a little bit. And as Peter said, in spring of 2016, we had that meeting, we had consensus, we had this new sort of concept on what dam removal might look like that was, more appealing to our local stakeholder group. But we did have, this price tag of, getting upwards between $140 and $150 million to think about. And as Peter said, the funding committee came together, and just to highlight, who that is and what that is, it's been about 10 or 12 folks over the past 4 years now. I don't think we knew we were signing up for a 4-year tour of duty there when we first got involved, at least I didn't. But it's about 10 or 12 of us, and it represents a number of key folks who have a stake in this project, who have expertise to bring. It's everyone from the county, and we've had a great time working with Peter and Glenn and others at the county. I know Pam's in the audience. But also folks like the Matilija Coalition with Paul, other local NGOs that are involved like Cal Trout, Surfrider, who Paul also represents, the Ojai Valley Conservancy, who I know is here this evening. So the NGOs represented. We also had a number of key agencies involved who have stuck with us very closely over the years. NOAA, National Marine Fisheries Service, has been deeply involved through Mark Capelli. We've had California Fish and Wildlife, and California Coastal Conservancy as well, which has been really holding the water and funding the project in a major way over the past few years. So that's our funding committee, largely, and we've been coming together again on a regular basis for 4 years now. Initially, when we got started, our first sort of task was to look at this number again, and this is a breakdown of the costs, the estimated project costs, and this is our kind of 2017 best estimate. But you can see it's that pretty big number down there at the bottom. Couple of take-home points for me on this. As Peter said, the previous project that we were looking at, primarily with the Army Corps, was much more expensive. This is a big project. It is a big bottom line. We recognize that. But think also about the cost savings from that previous project, which was well up over $200 million with inflation factored in. But it's still big. And we also know that it's part of the nature of it is the fact that we have all of these components. It's not just dam removal. It's all of these pieces downstream that must be put into place in order for our community to stay safe and for all of the risks and elements to be taken care of along the way, from bridges to levees to the water supply, and even a pretty significant chunk for post-construction costs as well. So, the funding committee saw that, and we also, as we were looking at the Army Corps costs and thinking about escalation and inflation, we knew that as we started to tackle a funding plan for this and do research on all the different types of funding that could cover that amount, we also knew that if we waited and just did the funding plan and didn't start fundraising, that the cost would just keep getting higher and higher over the years with inflation, with those construction costs that Peter identified. So basically what we decided as a group was to do it simultaneously, to create our funding plan and to dive right in on the opportunities that were available at the time for starting to pull money in on the project. And that's what we did. And I'll say first off too that the funding plan does exist. It's on the Matilija Coalition site if you ever want some. It's gripping reading, fundraising plan for Matilija Dam removal, but it is in there. It's a public document, and happy for folks to go in there and check it out to see what we came up with. And roughly speaking, by the way, our approach was to say, okay, if we're not going to get a big monster chunk of money from the federal government, we have to look at every possible funding source, from state to federal to local, public, private, all sorts of different, multi-pronged effort in terms of fundraising. So that's what we did in the funding plan, and it's all in there. At the same time, like I said, we started to write proposals to try to bring money in on the project and really get things going on this new alternative that Peter described. Our first opportunity there came through Prop 1 funding, which some of you may remember a number of years back, passed in the state of California, with a pretty significant chunk of money available for this type of project, for southern steelhead restoration and dam removal. And that CDFW 65% design and planning project for $3.3 million was our first successful grant that came in the door in 2017, about a year after our funding committee started up. And we saw that as a couple of things. First of all, as a way to get the project really moving, that concept, to bring design up to a certain level, to get environmental review underway in terms of the CEQA and NEPA processes, and to build a relationship also with California Fish and Wildlife, who we knew at that time was really interested in this project. You know, this project, as these guys have said, it's been going for a long time. I've only been on since, about 2016, so I'm the newbie here. But we knew that California Fish and Wildlife was interested. We knew that this was a priority with the fish, with all the aspects involved. And we felt like this first grant and successful effort through that Prop 1 funding initiative was proof of that. So that grant has been running for the past couple of years. Peter and team will go through some of the updates on that in the technical review in just a moment, so I won't go into that. But we kept going. And just to jump to the other California Fish and Wildlife item up there, the Santa Ana Bridge replacement, this was another example. Just recently, in May of just this past year, 2019, we got news that our most recent proposal into Cal Fish and Wildlife was successful for an even bigger chunk of funding, with somewhere around $13.4 million for the complete completion of that Santa Ana Bridge element through construction. And again, this is proof positive that the state really has significant skin in the game, is putting major dollars on the table to get this thing going, and also to complete downstream components, not just dam removal. This is something else that I think we saw as a real need, as a proof point for the project, was that folks would get not excited just about the dam removal, which we know is very exciting, as Glenn said, but what has to happen downstream, and to see this project as an ecosystem-wide, a watershed-wide effort was really key. So we think we've succeeded in that. And by the way, David Yardis was our author on that proposal and has been instrumental in making these kind of dollars happen for us, and he'll speak in a moment. NFWF, National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, has also come in with some good funding for estuarine and coastal modeling. Again, that's just an example of how we're continuing to look at other funding opportunities, whether they're government or federal level, what have you. And then just to spend a little bit of time on the bottom item there, Resources Legacy Fund. RLF is a major player nationwide, but particularly in the West, in conservation efforts. And early in this project, around 2016, 2017, they created what they call the Open Rivers Fund, which is a fund that is sort of resourced by Hewlett Foundation, and involves a 10-year, $50 million effort to remove dams in the western U.S. And Resources Legacy Fund selected the Matilija project as one of their first 3 projects that they would support, and not just support with funding, and this is really key for RLF. They have brought in significant dollar support, as you can see, but also through expertise, political connection, and the kind of work that's necessary to get this project included in those state bonds. RLF has incredible contacts and resources in Sacramento, and they have been instrumental in helping us get the language into Prop 1, Prop 68, which, by the way, was, the $13.4 million is really coming out of kind of a combined Prop 68, Prop 1. But getting that language in there for this local project takes a lot of work in Sacramento, and RLF is helping us to have the connections to do that. So this represents, pretty significant forward momentum, I think. Again, it's a big bottom line for the project. We absolutely understand that, and we're going to continue to push year on year to seek out those additional funding resources. And I'd like to hand it off maybe at this point to David Yardis, who again has been our latest addition to the team. He's working with us as a consultant, being funded by Resources Legacy Fund, and he's going to talk a little bit about some current proposals in the works and some future funding opportunities. So here's David.
Thank you, Hans. Hi, everyone. Let me start by saying I've gotten some shout-outs today, and I appreciate that deeply, but I just want to say this is very much a team effort, and particularly when you really are the newbie, it takes a village to come up the curve and pull on everybody's incredible expertise on this project. So I'm grateful for the opportunity to be part of this team and trying to keep everything moving forward. If I can figure out how to work this. What did I do? There we go. All right, so where are we? So with the grants in place, the studies in progress, all the stuff that Hans just was describing, we have really kind of focused as a top priority on trying to get as many of the projects, the downstream projects and the dam itself, together, lined up with final design project funding. The 65% grant takes projects through some kind of intermediate level, preliminary design intermediate, but really in order to be shovel ready and have a good chance of getting that implementation funding, it's really helpful to get all of these projects to final design status as much as possible, really ready to go. And so that's what this slide represents. We've got two different proposals pending with the Camino Cielo Bridge replacement. One through the State Coastal Conservancy, which is kind of a follow-on from an effort that was actually successful from 2017, but was kind of deferred pending some other projects, and is now back on the front burner. That project is being hopefully cost shared by a pending request to the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation through their partnership with NOAA and its Emergency Coastal Resilience Fund. And so that's a $230,000 cost share proposal. And both of those would position the Camino Cielo project with a final design within a 2-3 year period. Then we have a similar effort going on with Matilija Dam and the 3 levee projects at Live Oak Acres, Casitas Springs, and Miners Oaks. And so that's with the Wildlife Conservation Board has invited that effort. It's kind of a residual of some funds that were originally kind of reserved or earmarked for cost sharing for the Santa Ana Bridge replacement, and then when Department of Fish and Wildlife funded that in full, it left open an opportunity, and we said, we could really try and get this whole project positioned. So those, all the work that you'll hear about in the technical updates, that will all move forward towards final design if this proposal is successful. So it's really important. Priority acquisitions, we also have $1 million possible willing seller acquisition of a strategic property under discussion request with Wildlife Conservation Board, and then a multi-agency discussion with WCB, Fish and Wildlife, Resource Legacy Fund, and Coastal Conservancy on recreation plan development, which would involve access and trails, et cetera, up into Matilija Canyon post-dam removal, not just let's get the dam out, but what's left afterward and how can the public enjoy that. And then finally, just kind of doubling back on what Hans said, there's private sector support that includes RLF again, stepping up with another year of strategic funding, and we're now dialoguing with the Pew Charitable Trust, and they are very interested. They've added that to their strategic plan, dam removal to their strategic plan, and we're talking with them about a couple of really focused efforts where they would bring some extremely valuable risk and liability analysis and other efforts to bear. So that's all work in progress. And meanwhile, there's an effort to try to keep moving forward on the funding plan with work plan updates, and because both of these efforts are promising, we still have a long way to go. So here we've got back to that overall goal of roughly $150 million. We've made really good headway on, in round numbers, 20 million of that, leaving about 130 to go. It's a big hole to fill. If we'd gotten that 80 million, it wouldn't be such a big hole, but we didn't, so we got to keep working at it. And so this is kind of a list of opportunities from the funding plan, from the updates that are very much in progress, everything that the funding committee has been working on for the last couple of years. Variety of existing state grant programs, future state bond opportunities. We're not giving up on federal. It's a difficult environment to navigate right now, but somehow there's going to be an infrastructure bill, or there's going to be opportunities. Earmarks might be back. Who knows? So that's something that RLF again is helping us in DC. Pew will undoubtedly be able to help us keep an eye on what's going on the Hill and find strategic opportunities there as well. And then a critical one is the local and private side of things. There's the private sector support is already very critical, and expanding and growing that in a variety of ways will be critical to long-term success, particularly when we get to a shovel-ready project and we can do a big capital campaign around removing the dam itself. We think that will create a magnet for a lot of diverse funding sources. And then a number of things that will require dialogue with the community, beginning with briefings like this in terms of other local cost share opportunities. There's a measure potentially on the ballot relating to sales tax and open space, maybe something similar to that for watershed restoration and dam removal. There may be opportunities under the Districts Establishment Act. We know that all of those things have to go back to the voters and need to be supported by the local community first and foremost. So we'll be making the case to everyone, and a small amount of local funding will be a real magnet for pulling in the leveraging the state and federal investments that will really help this entire watershed. So that's what's in progress. I think that's it for the funding side. Hans, do you want to wrap it?
Yeah, maybe I'll just wrap really quickly by saying that none of this happens without a lot of help, as David said, from a lot of folks. And I do just want to say that while this picture shows the most recent funding efforts, this project over the long haul has been supported very heavily by the county through, county staff time and other funds, by the California Coastal Conservancy in particular. Those are folks we want to just, entities that we want to remain mindful of as long supporters. And also by elected officials. So, from Supervisor Steve Bennett, who has been a major supporter of this over the years, and for our Board of Supervisors to be supportive of this effort is critical, because the dam does belong to the county. It's the county's dam. And also, other elected officials such as Congresswoman Julia Brownlee, Monique Limon, and Hannah Beth Jackson here from California State Legislature and Senate. These are folks who have written letters, supported the project time and again, and helped us pull these kinds of dollars in the door through these proposals that require a lot of that evidence of support. And we'll be continuing to work on those relationships over time as well. But say thanks to those elected leaders.